in these discussions, in this re-energizing mode of engagement with Turkey, you get actually this return to buffer zone in the name of Turkey being container, Turkey being balancer. From European perspective, from the refugee crisis, Turkey is considered as a very, very important container of the refugees. And if Turkey contains 2.5 million and refugees do not come to Europe, then of course Europe is not going to have very much problem. So in this sense, all Europe and European states and European Union at large talks about is how to advance, how to enhance Turkey's capacity, not only to contain, but also to manage, the refugees in Turkey. Management in the sense of need assessment, management in the sense of creating, for instance, work permits for the refugees, and management in the sense of educational facilities. Let me actually mention that 375,000 of this 2.5 million are kids going to school, primary school, secondary school, and high school in Turkey. So education constitutes extremely important need assessment part of the refugee crisis. So in this sense, from the European perspective, you sort of see indirectly, implicitly, not explicitly, kind of approach Turkey as a container, as a buffer vis-a-vis refugees. From a Washington, United States, and the Western point of view on the basis of security, on the basis of NATO, Turkey is also regarded, approached as a container, as a buffer vis-a-vis ISIL's expansion, because it is only Turkey, that could actually that could enable the Western coalition to contain ISIL or to actually decrease the power and influence of ISIL. So in this sense, interestingly, we have this revitalization moment in which we are also observing the revitalization of this buffer zone identity, this time expressed as a buffer and container and balancer. The point actually is, let me finish here, when you are buffer, when you are container, when you are balancer, the primacy mode of operation is based on security, not economy, not democracy, not humanitarianism, not mediation, not conflict resolution. So in this sense, Turkey is kind of an extremely strategic buffer, strategic container, based on the primacy of security concerns over the other concerns, rights, freedoms, liberties, so on and so forth. So of course, when that happens, you could actually explain why revitalization occurring without very much discussion of what goes on in Turkey democratically in terms of rights and freedoms. So we have actually this moment of revitalization going on, and maybe actually I stop here, and then I was going to talk about the Kurdish question, but I'm quite sure there will be questions that I will actually elaborate on that. Anyway, thank you very much. This is what I.
Okay, so we have time for some questions. But shall we take like 2 or 3 questions?
Whatever.
Yes? Okay. So, please.
Well, you've opened up so many avenues for discussion. It's very tempting to focus in on your conclusion. But stepping back a bit, right now, all of this ends up circling around the cockpit of Syria and its collapse. And we have now the possibility of a diplomatic process finally in train. I'd like your assessment of the Vienna process, the factors at play, the likelihood of success, and the likelihood of obstacles. Is there a chance we might finally see a way out of the morass?
Another question, please.
My question is about your point on the relationship between state failure and problem of ISIL particularly. So from your point of view, it seems that state failure, it was a state failure in Iraq and Syria that caused ISIL, not the other way around, right? And don't you think it's a little bit difficult if we don't put it in a historical context to discuss that? We have a regional ideology in the Middle East called political Islam or Islamism, and it has been challenging the very existence of nation states in the Middle East since Second World War, right? And the idea of re-territorialization and that kind of thing, it's not a new thing that ISIL raises. So it's we have had this challenge of non-state Islamist actors versus states that they just call that a kind of colonial territorialization in the Middle East and stuff like that. So don't you think it was, the main problem is actually more historical than to just some state fails and that it caused a problem, right? That is something like more historical and social and connected with particularly that kind of new regional order in the Middle East after the Second World War.
This one.
Okay.
Maybe these two, because these are
Yes, yeah.
big questions.
Big questions.
And I mean, as I said, yesterday's talks were cancelled, and possible date to start is 29th, on the 29th of January. I was actually looking at, before I came here for this talk, I was looking at the Turkish newspapers because from a Russian point of view and an American point of view, the Kurdish forces, PYD and YPG, should be on the table, and that Turkey doesn't want them on the table. And as a matter of fact, Turkish Foreign Affairs Minister said that, and the letter went to them, the invitation letter, and the Turkish Foreign Affairs Minister, Mr. Çavuşoğlu, said that, of course, based on the Prime Minister Davutoğlu and President Erdogan's, sort of interventions and take on the situation, that Turkey boycotts and wouldn't attend the, 29th Vienna starting Geneva Convention. But, the thing actually is, maybe my fear is the conflict past the threshold, and on the just on the table this tripartite solution, which is the starting the ceasefire, 6 months transition period in which Assad regime and Assad might stay, and then preparing Syria for elections and new constitution and 18 months start. Turkey might be okay with the Assad staying in the 6 months or something, but now, on the one hand, Iran and Russia, on the other hand, Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Turkey, the rise of sectarianism, the proxy wars, for the region. The reason why I underlined the importance of the term of proxy wars, when you look at what's going on in that region, including Eastern Mediterranean coast, on the one hand you are talking about Iraq, and Syria, failed state and everything, but on the other hand, you are talking about the Navy forces of United States, France, Russia. It's almost actually like one way of we discuss this is maybe the re-emergence of the Cold War again. And this was discussed in the Georgia time and then the Ukraine time. But this really actually there is the East Mediterranean component of it, and Russia wants to have access to East Mediterranean and wants to have this access from Georgia, Ukraine, Crimea, Armenian, Iran, and so on. So in this sense, when you are so much interconnectedness in terms of the problems, refugees, proxies, ISIL and so on and so forth, it is a bit difficult, you actually to see that this kind of talks might create a solution. But on the other hand, I am hopeful from Turkey's capacity in the post-construction period in terms of building cities and so on and so forth, if we get the chance to have an interregnum government in Syria, in a way that little normalization might actually occur, then Turkish companies can easily actually build the war-torn areas, and there will be an economic and you know, sort of a base sort of infrastructural push for Syria that might open up a space for thinking about what's going to happen to Syria, you know, later on. But on the other hand, I'm extremely pessimist on this Syrian and Iraq situation, and then it's gonna 2016 and 17 we will see actually more and more acceleration of conflict and isolating. And this question of your state failure and political Islam, I agree, of course. For instance, you know, we were against, I was personally, and lots of us in Turkey were against the war on Iraq, American occupation of Iraq, and you know, 2003, and if you actually remember those years, 2003, 4, and 5, when America invaded Iraq, and the way that they treated the, you know, the Sunnites and you know, all the Iraqi people, and the way that they treated Saddam Hussein, the way that, you know, he was executed. And then when you look at the sort of post-conflict Iraq regime and the role of Maliki, who is actually kind of privileging Shiites over Sunnites, and the Sunnites are being excluded from the governance, of course we have to go back. And then, and if you go, I did, to the Turkish border. By the way, Turkey has 980 kilometers long border with Syria and Iraq. And when you actually go to the border, you see British colonialism. You know, like you and I are cousins, and you end up in Syria, and I end up in Turkey, and this is the borders, like post-colonial and situation. Yes, I agree. I agree with that. And also from you know, Arab Spring to today we have actually sectarian conflict, political Islam, you know, Muslim Brotherhood, and all of these claims to take over the state rather than changing the state kind of things. I agree with that, but you know. Where we are right now, what are we going to focus on? Identities or institutions? And my actually years, it was interesting to say that in Carleton University, you know, I always actually worked on identities, citizenship, everything, but you know, recently I pay more attention to institutions. And if you don't have institutions that actually, like, that's one of the problems with the Arab Spring. If you don't have institutions inclusive enough to back the identity claims, then you know, the degree of uncertainty, the degree of risk is very high. So in this sense, one should actually look at the institutions and identities at the same time, and that's why in 5 and 6 I will actually point out the importance of, you know, or referring to the lack of inclusive institutions, lack of equal citizenship. But when I go to the meetings about this situation, we all talk about the ways in which you know. The importance of building these institutions, and at least the possibility of equal citizenship in terms of rights and freedoms of everyone to tackle with sectarianism. And that would actually be a way of actually maybe backing the talks. If you don't have this, just talks and war and you know, conflict will not show. Let me be provocative in this way actually. I mean, I always been critical on Huntington and Clash of Civilization, but you know, from 9/11 onwards, we always refer to Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilization thesis. You know, these are clashes happening, so and so forth too. And not my professors here, but my professors in Turkey. This is actually also Huntington, 1970s, The Soldier and the State. And as a matter of fact, in Soldier of the State, you know, when you actually take political development courses, where we used to actually in the university years and everything, you know, we were also criticizing Huntington at that time, because in Soldier of and then the State, Huntington talks about, you know, privileging order and stability before democracy in order to be able to open a space for democracy. And there was this very big push on order, state, and stability. When I look at the Middle East on the basis of institutions, sometimes it helps me actually to get the attention of the you know, modernizationists. I talk about two Huntingtonian movements. The second Huntingtonian movement was based on Clash of Civilization, which was very strong and influential in the 9/11 years up to Arab Spring. But after Arab Spring, or since Arab Spring onwards, we are actually going back also to the first Huntingtonian movement, in which Huntington does not talk about identities and culture, but talks about order, stability, and state. And when you are actually, when you go to the Middle East, when you read on what goes on in the Middle East, all you hear is the need for order, the need for state, and the need for stability or normality. But so in this sense, that actually is kind of backs my point that institutions matter more. But of course, we have to ask this question to these guys who are very rightly so talking about the need for state in Syria. Because if Syrian state remained as state, for instance, Syria-Turkey relations, 90s, very problematic, but two-state relations. Right now problematic more because there is one state and no state situation. You could see that the border kind of thing. But of course we have to raise this question. What kind of order